Welcome to Global Citizen Life podcast. Today on the show, we have a fellow Canadian, Tracy. She has moved from Canada to Malta. So, welcome, Tracy. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
So, first question, out of all of the places to potentially go, why did you choose Malta?
Tiny little Malta. And I love it.
Tiny little Malta.
We always learned that we always learned in school that Italy is the boot and Sicily is the pebble. And
Yeah.
Malta, if you look at a map, is like this tiny little piece of a pebble at the very bottom. I love it. It's about, I don't know, 30 kilometers square or something like that, maybe 50. I don't know. So it's very small. And then the northern island, Gozo, which is the even more tranquil, very traditional places that looks like 1,000 years ago in some area. Gozo is even smaller. So one end of the island to the other, if there's no traffic for Gozo, 15 minutes, and for Malta, there was no traffic, maybe 25, but there's very often traffic on the main island. That's what a lot of people will tell you about Malta and the main island getting a little bit, overpopulated in some ways. But I love it. I fell in love with it. My family, my husband, my son and I are here now, and our daughter, son-in-law, and grandchild are on the way to come and check it out to see if they might want to go to school here. Um, but we first came here in 2019, my husband and I, for a business conference, and then we really liked it. We didn't get a chance to see much of the country. We saw, the St. Julian's, which is the least interesting part of the country, actually. It's kind of the party town Europe center, but that's where the conference was. And when we started looking, on a day off from the conference, oh gee, what can we look at and see what we can do around Malta? That's when we really fell in love with the history. There's like 8,000-year-old goddess temples, structures that are still up, some of the oldest structures that humans have built. There's all the knight's history, all kinds of stuff. But anyway, so our personal story after the 2019 visit, we came again, right, there was COVID. And then right after COVID, the first time we saw a conference that was starting again was November 2021, was in Malta again. And we said, let's just go. Let's get on a plane and go. Any excuse is a good excuse. So that time we spent a lot more, literally traveled all around the island. The following year, I was asked to speak here at that same business conference. So at that time we came, and we had planned to stay for 3 months. My mother saw a photo of me in Malta on my socials, and she said, I've never seen you look happier. Why don't we have a girl trip there? So we had a trip here. That was our fourth visit. Our fifth one was last year. We came in November for 17 days, Sally, for my husband to get some dental work done. And the plan was 17 days, and then we'd head back to Ireland for a couple days, and then go back to Canada. And we were thinking at some point we should, maybe come and put in our residency, because my husband has, even though we've only ever lived in Canada, he holds an Irish passport because his dad was an Irish citizen. So that opened up the EU for
Perfect.
us. And a few years ago, he said, I should probably get my passport. And we're like, okay. I hadn't thought much about it. But then when we completely fell in love with Malta, we started thinking, oh, should we look at that digital nomad thing? Should we look? Someone said, why are you looking at that when you hold a EU passport? And we're like,
Right.
oh,
That's a golden ticket. That is a golden ticket, a EU passport for because it's good for all the EU countries.
right? It's incredible. And finally, that's in North America, that's mind blowing, because in some ways I always thought the benefits that we have in Canada as Canadians are so much better, because I was always comparing them just with the states, healthcare and stuff like that. Well, when I got over here, people were telling me that like university is free. I still can't get my head around this. So you can be basically like, you can clean toilets at the hotel for a living, but if your child gets good enough grades and wants to be a doctor, they just, go ahead and do it. So yeah, so a lot of things we really fell in love with about Malta in terms of the I mean, such a different culture. Like it's 1,000% different than Canada. But every day I'll feel like I'm walking into a painting or like an alternate reality. But you know, it's basically why Malta. It's essentially crime free, especially Gozo. I mean, people leave. You can leave your wallet, you can leave your purse hanging around on the beach, and be very rare that anybody would touch it. It's crazy, especially coming from Canada or North America these days. So, we don't see tent cities, haven't had a homeless person or anybody I don't see anybody in distress, even on the streets in 11 months, or anybody asking for change, or anybody looking uncomfortable or looking like they needed any help, which is, again, coming from Ontario these days, pretty striking. So, and I have a 21-year-old son in Hamilton, and even in Canada these days, I'm sometimes worried about what he's going to encounter on the street because things have changed so dramatically there. Here I joke, but it's not a joke. It's, you could just leave and wander for like a week. Nobody's going to bother you. Just don't get hit by a car, which is, you have to watch out. Some things like driving, or maybe not the way we would expect in Canada, right? The roads are those little roads that are like,
And yeah,
it's
they're
like
narrow
between,
and they drive
yeah.
on the left side of the road.
You got it. And the narrow is crazy. It's almost like I remember being in Jamaica once, similar. The guy in Jamaica once said to me, "You guys are going to laugh. It's a two-way street, but you think it's a one-way street." And there,
Yeah.
so it's all that like navigating where you look, oh no, I'm going to die if the cars go. And then one of them, just pulls aside
Pulls
so the
off.
other one can go down, right? You're like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, because the cities are so old, they weren't built for cars, right? It was
Exactly.
horses way back then, or just walking.
You got it.
And
Our little village, Shakia, was the first one built outside of Rabat in Gozo. So it's like it dates back in the 1600s in terms of the actual village,
hmm,
incorporation. The landscape and is like thousands of years old and stuff. But like in terms of human being on it, but in terms of like the modern, so yeah, we have these little narrow streets and everything. But yeah, so it's 100% like a cultural difference, but I really love it, and I love trying to learn the language. The language is really fascinating, and actually, the language is part of what is similar to what I like about the culture here, which is it's often called the crossroads between. It's part of the EU. It's been EU since 2005, but it's often called the crossroads between the EU, the Middle East, and North Africa, and a lot of Malta would look more like Europe, but Gozo, in a couple of villages they named in a recent travelogue, including mine, Shakia, it says it's almost like literally walking, it's like North Africa, essentially. It's more like North Africa. And it's actually really interesting because when I watch the news, whether it's Middle East or Africa or a lot of things, we've looked at our whole life coming from North America, in some ways, it's looked so separate and different that it didn't seem real. You didn't recognize it in your mind as homes and communities and landscape. You know what I mean? And now
hmm,
when I see some news reports, they're like, it hits in a whole different way because it looks like home. It looks like my street, and so it really brings home. These are communities. These are, even though it doesn't look like it looks like in North America, it's very, the modern life is going on, and what looks like people are still living in like, very, a lot of the Maltese like the very modern places. We have those too, but what I love and what us people from North America love is people can also still live in literally 400-year-old stone houses. We call them castle houses. They call them like house of character here. We're like, it's a castle. For the price of a two-bedroom apartment in Toronto. And it's not that
well,
it's that cheap. It's not like Mexico cheap or anything, but you know,
well, it is an island, so people have to they're all the time. Islands always cost a little bit more because everything has to get to the island, and so the prices. But not everybody wants the cheapest lifestyle either.
no, exactly. So it's not, but and even so, but it is actually still cheaper than North America, which is crazy
Mhm.
because Malta is considered, and because of my work, I'm a publicist, and they often have to, like I go to the Cannes Film Festival every year, which is on the French
Okay.
Riviera. So
Hmm.
between the French Riviera and Malta, these places are, often considered the playgrounds of the rich, the
Right.
yachts, the whatever, and they are to some extent, which is why it's really surprising to almost every day being like, oh, cheaper than Toronto. Wow. I tell you, it's pretty eye-opening. People are like, oh, Malta, oh, the French Riviera. And I'm there and I'm just, unless you're there during the Cannes Film Festival, everything is like insane. Like, it's going to be
Right.
$11, 11 euro for a pop. But that's because it's Cannes. But generally, like if you're at a regular place, if you were at Cannes when it's not the Cannes Film Festival, or if you're in Malta at a normal time of year, even at high tourist prices, I find everything, even the expensive stuff, is a good 30% cheaper than what I would spend to pay in Canada. So it's not cheap
Wow.
like you're going for,
Hmm.
but I'm still often surprised at the extremely high end euro, whatever, and it's cheaper than I pay in Toronto. And I'm like, wow, what do
Right,
I pay
right.
for it?
You're still getting a better quality of life for a less cost.
Yeah, way better quality of life.
Yeah. No, I was in Malta 2 years ago. A friend of mine has been spending quite a bit of time there. They're kind of searching around for another home location. They've got the U.S. and Costa Rica, and they were looking for somewhere else. And Malta is really high on their list. So they've been going back every year for a couple of years now, and each time checking out different areas, seeing what would
That's what
work
we
for them.
did.
And it's a great way to do it.
That's what
For
we
some
did.
people,
Yeah,
yeah, for some people that want to just, take the plunge and go, obviously making sure that you can get your residency and do it all legally. And for those who are unsure, it's great to just go and spend, as Canadians, spend 90 days in Malta and then go back to Canada for a
that's what we
bit
did on our
or
last trip, and
something.
when we did that, we stayed a month and a half in Gozo in the North
Hmm.
Island, where we ended up ultimately choosing. But just to make sure, we also stayed in like three or four different places for like 10 days at a time. And this is what we did: not just different areas of the city of the country on the main island, completely different areas from the from the rurally up to the completely urban to the like hyper urban to the touristy areas to the, but we also stayed in different kinds of places. So we saw neighborhoods. So we stayed in like a nice condo by the beach, not right by the beach, but like, and where like locals lived, fairly close to where you could see, but what wasn't a beach house, a condo. And then we stayed at like it was just one from Airbnb that was much more normal, like less of a condo and more of like a regular apartment where a lot of recent new immigrants were coming from like a Scarborough kind of area in Toronto, which is where I'm from. So like that was neat too, like to see the like where a lot of recent new immigrants came that weren't necessarily the yacht people, you know what I mean? But so we saw
Right.
people that were actually living, and I appreciate that to see the life in the actual neighborhoods. So we stayed in different neighborhoods, different kinds of neighborhoods, from upscale to normal to whatever. And I think that gave us a really good, when we came back and when we were, looking at real estate, not to buy yet, that'll be the next step, but to rent, that was, we were much more empowered. Like things meant something to us. Before, when we were first looking at the real estate listings, we didn't know what anything meant. Just city names. We Google it. Oh, where's that? Okay, it looks like a nice house, sure. But there's, I mean, you can't really go wrong in Malta, but you really should know what neighborhoods are like before
Right.
you choose to, because everything's different, right?
Absolutely. And some you'll feel more comfortable with you, and not that there's anything wrong with others. It's just I don't, whatever it is, we just get that feeling, right? It's just that
Yeah,
energy in different neighborhoods. We get different energy feelings because we're all different
100%.
people, and everybody likes something that's a little bit different. And I always say, like, home should be our sanctuary. So wherever it is, your home should be in an area that you like. And so it's finding those. And just because, maybe your first stop, as you said, you went through the different areas, some that you're going to enjoy more than others. And so I say to people too to do exactly what you did, because if not, like, just because I go to one neighborhood or one city even, and I'm like, oh no, I don't like it here. Well, I haven't really given it, is it just because I didn't like that neighborhood? Maybe
Yeah,
another
that's
neighborhood
true. We don't know.
within
We
that
might think of
city.
that as the country because we're new. So but that's the country to us, unless we,
Yeah. It's
actually
like,
look a little deeper.
yeah, I mean, it's like somebody coming to Canada and going to Toronto and saying they don't like it, or going to Winnipeg and they don't like it, or Saskatchewan, or,
Yeah,
you
yeah. And
know,
they just think they've
you
seen the
can't
whole thing.
compare the whole
Yeah.
country. And granted, Canada and the United States, they're very large countries, but still, you've got to, each city has a
Even in a
different vibe
small
to it, and
country,
the
they really do have
neighborhoods.
a different vibe. Yeah, even in the like, there are some that are like really different, like Conspicua, which and I like them all for different reasons. But like
Mm,
Conspicua, Bormala, which is the old, even older than Valletta, it's the old, the original, one of the original capital is wasn't the capital, but one of the original like with water. That's like a very like different, more rural, more crowded, more but Maltese than the rural, um, St. Julian's, which was built out of like a resort town and now is like crazy part of town. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there's those, they're both rural, but they're completely different vibes. And then there's, Amnina, which is like the silent city, the ancient capital on the hill, which is like very Arab influenced in its architecture and stuff because it was primarily the capital between 900 and 1200 and stuff. And that, anyways, there's all this fascinating, like every, and they really are like just 20, however far apart, but completely different spiritual feels, if you want to say, right?
Right, right. And so you mentioned that the kind of you feel the cost of living there is about 30% less than Toronto, like
Yeah,
for
I
kind
would
of like your
say,
everyday goods.
yeah, to compare it to like specific things, like for example, bread in Canada is usually $3 or $4. If you go, you might get it for $3 on sale, right? And here it's always like $1, sort of either 1 year between €1 and €1.50. So like a euro, 150 to 225, right? So that's a
Hmm.
good, that's milk, even more like milk will pay, if we're paying $4, I'm usually paying €1 or €1.50 here. So for the bread, the milk, the butter, those kind of things, it's at least 30% less. And then I find for housing, 5 years ago, it looked a lot cheaper here, like a lot, like I was like, whoa, kind of cheap, but
That's
now like
everywhere in the world right now.
everywhere, like
Five
the
years
locals
ago,
look
everywhere was
so
cheaper.
the locals here will tell you, oh, it's gone very expensive, but still, comparatively speaking,
Yep.
and Malta's a little different than Gozo. Malta is going up a little bit more. But Gozo, for example, if you want to spend $2,000, so like €1,500, you're getting like you might be getting a giant house of character, 4 bedroom, 2 balconies, a hot tub, a swimming pool, like that looks like a castle to us, right?
Right.
Or you could have a Toronto apartment, a Toronto 1 bedroom.
Big difference.
So it's a lot more than 30% in some ways, you know what I
Right,
mean? Like
right.
it all depends what you're looking at. And then of course, as you know from living in Europe, we have the travel thing. Well, here, if you're a local, like if you're, which is me now, like if you're a resident, you get your bus is for free. Like I don't, my boss husband's always saying, take the bus, it's free. I'm always calling the Uber and everything because I'm such a busy executive. I'm always like, I gotta get there, I gotta get there. But it is nice. They do have buses for free for residents. They do have subsidized, and I don't know what the exact amount is, but apparently, and I don't drive, but apparently the gas that you put in your car, just the gas that heats your house, is subsidized to a certain dollar amount or euro amount per year, so it doesn't go up and down. People know what it is for the year. There's, and when you look at buying, so there's no, this is like blew my mind. There's no property.
That high annual property tax. No
I'm still
more.
trying. Those things that you like think are just the way things are,
Yep.
and then you find out they're not. You're like, wait. University is free. Wait. I had to ask someone like 5 times. I still have not really processed. So I'm a resident now. I'm a wife of an EU citizen.
Hmm.
So not only our 21-year-old son, he's allowed to go to university for free once he qualifies, but my husband can, and I can for
Right.
free. What? I'm 54 years old. I've built my whole career without going to university. Now I'm like, well, wait, all right, maybe what would I like to take? Maybe I
Well,
will.
I mean, and it's a smart thing to do. They want to keep their people educated because those are the people that
It,
are
it
going to
makes
be
so much
taking over and
sense.
running the country. So you
Yeah.
want a highly educated nation of people.
And this is the thing now. I'm understanding why people don't fall through the cracks between that education thing and my son's on the autism spectrum, very smart, but if you don't like give him some guidance, you just sit in his room and do whatever, right? And here we're not even here like 2 months, and my friend who was the consul general to Canada, so he has been guiding us, saying, "Hey, you should check this out or whatever." He lives here now. He's Maltese. He's was saying, "Hey, why don't you go down to support? And they have all these programs." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to take advantage of any programs. We're here, we're self sufficient, we're good." Oh no, that's if you live here, you need to be going to let them. So basically, they've already like embraced them with all these programs that we don't have in Canada. Because after 18 in Canada, a lot of these things age out. They're school based, and then after that, so now I'm like, wait a minute, what? They're going to give him a one-on-one, and he's like high functioning one-on-one person to go fill out applications with him, go to wherever, make sure that he's fully embraced in the community, whatever it takes. I'm like, So now I'm starting to understand. Remember what I said at the beginning about there's no homeless on the streets and how there's nobody that looks like they're distressed and nobody's begging for change. And when I tell people what it's like in Canada, they look shocked. And then, I'm like, how can it be that there's no homeless? And people say, well, if there was somebody on the street, they would go and they would find out what was wrong. And they're explaining to me like as though I don't get it, Well, of course, if there's somebody on the street who's stressed, somebody like an agency is going to go and help them. And I'm like, yeah, you'd think, okay, yeah, I get the idea, but that doesn't have, oh my gosh.
They have what a lot of countries don't, and it's called community. And the country is a community where
It's
they
really
help each
true.
other.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of other countries don't have that community feel. And sometimes I wonder though too that it probably is easier for smaller countries than for
I was
larger
going to say that
countries.
too in some
It
ways,
there
yeah.
yeah, and so not to bash saying like being from Canada that they don't have. I mean, it definitely is harder because it is, I would think, because it's such a big country, and spread out that some of those things are
And there's
easier.
reasons that I don't understand because I'm not an economist and stuff. But I mean, like, there's other, like, for good or bad, that I don't, again, I'm
Right.
not into politics or economists, but I know they're not members of, like, they're EU, but they're not NATO. So they have less responsibility in terms of what they have to give out. You know what I
Right.
mean? So that they're able to like spend their money on whatever. And also other things, they make decisions that maybe aren't good. Like they could have a lot more trees here. I'm not complaining. I love everything about Malta, but like they really could have a lot more greenery and trees. And someone said, well,
Mhm.
why don't they plant more trees? And then one person said, well, I talked to some, government guy here. He was like, well, the trees would have to be watered in the summer then, and which sounds like obvious, but that's a lot of resources and stuff. And then they're like, that we really are a parliamentary democracy that puts most of our resources, into our people. And I mean, you could say, yeah, well, you people, you want the trees and all that too. There's all, but I see what they're saying. There's like really the first stop is always like, okay, we got a bunch of money, and there's corruption and everything like there is everywhere. I'm not saying,
Of course.
that's it,
Of course.
but
But
in
it's kind
terms
of
of
like picking, it's kind of picking what's most important. And for them, education wise, more important because I mean it is an island. Where do they get their water from? And if they're watering a
yeah,
bunch of trees and then the houses can't, right?
yeah,
So as you
yeah.
said, there's multiple
There's
aspects
all those
of
things
every
that we
situation,
don't really, yeah,
every
exactly.
country.
So it's not like Canada doesn't
Absolutely.
do this and they should, or no, it's just that there's different circumstances in different
Right.
places. But it has been eye-opening. It does make me think that we could in North America do some things better because I'm like, I keep on coming back to how is this tiny little island, which has compared to our great country full of natural resources, we have the
Mm,
space and every natural resource known to man in Canada. Like we have everything. And Malta doesn't have trees or oil or, but how are they able,
right.
how are the people safe and well and not suffering? You know what I mean? So that I think we could,
Mm.
so it's, when I see things that are different, then I think, well, why don't they have this? Or why, when I get, that thing that you have from that, oh, how come they don't have that? I never see them with their helmets when they do the construction though. I'm always like, man, I don't know how much I really have to teach them because like I'm not seeing homeless, I'm not seeing, I'm
Right.
just learning.
And that's what it comes back to. Every country has pros and cons.
Yeah,
Right. And
exactly.
I just there's times that I talk to people too, and I'm like, why don't our leaders work together to do better? Because if certain countries are doing better in certain aspects,
This or
whatever that
that.
may
Yeah,
be,
yeah.
why aren't we sharing that with each other? Because then the world itself becomes better. Maybe that's just too simple minded of me
No, I think it's
to
too
have
not.
it,
It's yeah. It's just there. Yeah,
but
no, I think it's not simple
every
minded.
country has room for improvement. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
so a few things with that. So what was I going to say? So the cost of living's less, education is great. Obviously the weather, coming from
The weather was
Canada,
the
we
first. Yeah, weather. Well, and safety is huge too. Like that feeling of like just like honestly, like I was saying to my daughter, we're not pulling her, I'm not holding my purse even to me anymore. I'm not looking by, and I ask women this all the time everywhere I go because I want. Is it just me? Am I delusional? I ask women that are like expats here. I ask women that are and the Maltese people will say, "Oh, it used to be safer. Like everyone's used to be better in the world, right?" But everybody that I've talked to who's an expat that lived here for 10 years, 12 years, 5 years, 2 years, all the women I ask, they feel like they're like, "Oh yeah." I feel very safe. Like 1 in the morning, and that is huge. Really huge to feel that sense of security and safety. And I'm not a nervous person, but I'm just like I'm still looking at the like crime stories back at home, and I'm like, man, comparing that to here. And again, I lived in a good area, and yeah, but again, I find a lot of things have changed over the last few years just in the world, mental health, opiate crisis, cost of living crisis, homeless crisis. I don't know how it's affecting where listeners are living, but it's hit a lot of Canadian and a lot of Ontario cities really, really hard, right? It's
Yeah, I think
distressing.
generally pretty much across North America as a whole, Canada, the US for sure. And even because I split my most of my time between Spain and Montenegro. Again, through France, Spain, increase in everything. Montenegro, um, not as much, but Montenegro is a very, very tiny country.
We'll
So it
see.
is it's weird because some things will be more expensive, like occasionally some food or some clothing might be more expensive than say Barcelona, Spain. But I also look at the housing is substantially less, um, and bills and utilities substantially less. And but I also have to think like the country of Montenegro has a population of roughly 650,000 people in the entire country. And so I don't expect to get super cheap clothing or food because they're just not buying as bulk, like
Well,
as
that's one
say
thing
even
that's true.
Barcelona,
Malta,
one city compared to a whole country. Like they're so if they go
yeah,
to
you're right.
HP and
Clothes
they
and
need
like
computers.
appliances here are expensive. Yeah, like those kind of
Yeah.
things.
So there's certain things, but it's a balance. But there's also, as you said, safety is huge for me. Like it's kind of that return on investment, right? If I'm living somewhere, I'm investing my time, my money, I'm going to live there. What am I getting in return? In the sense of the things that I like the weather. If I have kids, the education system, the healthcare system, those types of things, safety, security, and everybody picks different places for different reasons. And there's that's what makes the world go round. If we all, I said, if we all liked the same stuff and all wanted the same thing, life would be really, really boring because everything would
Yeah.
be the same.
Yeah, well, like my friend said, who's British but ended up in Canada, like as a young person, and now she spends a lot of time in Guatemala, and she's looking, and she's like, I don't know if you guys have spent enough time everywhere. You haven't been to South America but before you picked Malta, and she's like, there's so many beautiful places in the world. We really love it here, right? So many reasons. Also, English language being the second language is easier for us too. My husband really appreciates that as like mid 50s. Even though I love to learn languages, and I'm learning grazie hafna, which is thank you very much, and narak, which is see you later. And I'm gonna learn. I'm gonna go take a course and everything. So I really do. Even though they say, oh, you don't have to. It's a second language is English. I think it's really, it's respectful to learn the
Right.
language as much as possible wherever you are and appreciate the culture and not just muscle and like expecting
Oh,
people to.
absolutely. And then you're more part of the culture. You're more part of a person who lives there. And as your friend says, I mean, it's a catch 22 in my opinion, because you can travel the world. And absolutely, there's so many gorgeous places in the world that people could
Yeah.
live and would love and enjoy. And I think a little bit is if you see too many, like if you're scouting where in the world am I going to go live, it's overwhelming because there's
Yeah.
so many places that it's almost impossible to pick. So we have to, I always say to people, look at yourself first. Like, what do you like to do? What types of activities, hobbies, things, weather, those types of things, because then you want to look at places that have those types of hobbies. Do you want to be in a place with a lot of expats or not? Or you want to integrate more locally? Do you want to be in a big touristy place or not? Do you need to be within so many hours of North America because your clients are in North America or whatever time zone that you may need because of the work you do? Like those are all things to take into consideration because the world is beautiful and there's so many amazing places.
And they're all over. It's all possible. You just got to figure it out and, take some work. It's not easy. And then you got to figure out the next step after you've got the residency. Now we're in the phase of like figuring out those how many months we have to be where and how many months we have to be the other one. And what we're going to do with our business and whether we're going to maintain, tax residency in Canada, or whether we're ready to like, not quite yet, but whether we'd be ready to make the jump to like a full life in Europe, in which case we would be that's a whole, we've spent the last like, however many months just getting the residency, right? We're one
Mhm.
single-minded, going through all those documents, even with the EU, but it's still complicated.
Oh yeah.
They
Yeah.
don't make it
But
easy.
it's as the old saying goes, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? Or how do you build a wall? One brick at a time.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
just it's wanted to because yeah, we could look at many things and just start to get overwhelmed
I was
because
gonna
it's
say
like,
you could
oh,
never
we have
make a move. You could just, if someone had
yeah,
told me at the beginning, oh, you have to do all this, and then once all that's done, then you got to figure out this next part, which I don't have in mind to think about taxes and finance. And I already have a business, and it's just complicated for me. I might have been frozen in place and just gone, oh, I guess it's too hard. You can't really leave. It's just too complicated. But
right.
no, I did it, and now I'm halfway.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
got to figure out the next part. I got my Malta tax appointment set up. I've
Good.
talked to my business consultant in Canada. I'm just, you know, I got all the
It's step by
professionals. I just
step.
got to, yeah,
It's it's step by step and millions of people do it because millions of
yeah,
people move abroad every year and I think I always say to people kind of first step is like really look into yourself. Why do you want to move? What are the reasons? And then what do you enjoy doing because you want to be moving to a place that has those things. Like I would never move to Norway. I mean, I would love to visit it in the summertime, but I hate winter. I don't like
yeah,
cold, don't really enjoy the
yeah. I'm
snow,
done
don't
with
do snow
that.
sports. So no snowy place. So that's easy to be like, mark those places as a no-go.
Yeah,
And then just to slowly narrow it down and then spend time, go visit. Because as we've already said, each destination, each city, each neighborhood will give a different vibe. And then when you pick the one that you want, look into what does it take to get residency or citizenship? Where am I at? And then just step by step, because it can be a lot, but it's worth it in the end.
it's worth it though. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. So what have you found maybe, because I don't want everybody to think, oh, I move abroad, everything's rainbows and butterflies, because it's not.
No,
There's always some issues or challenges or just some unforeseen things. What have you found have been some unforeseen things that you just didn't think about or didn't realize that were quite different in Malta?
Um, so I don't think I've run into anything that was like so different or not so different. Every a lot of things are different, but that's since I've been here, I don't think I've run into things that have like surprised me because this was my fifth visit here, and we did a lot of research and spent a lot of time here, and but so not in a negative way, but I think like some of there's still adjustments. You have to understand, and you have to realize that it's your own, and you really have to adjust your way of thinking. And I think part of the reason I haven't had some of those culture shocks that other expats that I've talked to have is because I really came into it really, really like wanting those cultural differences, and then we chose something so different, like not Malta but Gozo. Where it literally looks like North Africa, and where we have the modern life, we have cars and we have supermarkets, and they have Uber Eat, not Uber, it's whatever, it's Bolt, and we have delivery and all that stuff, right? But we also have the little truck that comes by with the food on it in the morning, and we also, the cars are fighting those little narrow space with actually a horse and buggy guy by, not even a horse and buggy, a guy with a truck, pulling a horse or like a little donkey, or so it's so dramatically different here that I'm not even in comparison mode. It's really like we chose a different like exposure, right? But I mean, little things bank. It's going to be a lot more complicated to get a bank account here in Malta. I don't know if you know the history of,
Okay.
so or if that's normal in other places, but it's a whole big deal. Where that's why we have a tax office, get the tax number, and figure all this stuff out and show them all this stuff, and also even I found dealing with. We were lucky because we had some help in dealing with Identity Malta, which is like the, I don't know what, the where you have to get your residency from.
Okay.
We
Mhm.
almost did. We could, we could very easily have not been able to do it because as Canadians, before the EU, My husband came in, with his EU passport. The second time we knew to do that. But the first time when we first came in, I came in with my Canadian passport, which means I have 90 days to stay to be there. And if we had not got our appointment and been into our appointment and got the receipt that I'm an EU family member waiting to hear if I'm going to get residency, I would have had to leave before I would have even had that residency appointment. We thought that was going to be a lot easier, that we could just come here. We have 3 months, we could apply. They were going to say, oh, you have to be here, you come on into your appointment. Well, no, like we were very, very lucky. And probably without the help and guidance of the ex-consul general to Canada, we happen to know from the entertainment project, I think it may not have happened. So we might have had to go back home and then come back and try it again. And then you can't, and then you have to go back home again because they're in no rush. They have to, like, that they don't have to comply with the 90 days. You know what I mean? They don't care if I leave. Once I got into that appointment and then I got my receipt, that says I have an application in, then I could say the 90 clock stopped. So,
right.
but
Yeah. Once they have that proof that it's in process, then you're okay.
But it's not as easy necessarily as
process.
you think. You can't just come over and think you're going to get like, and I don't know if that's normal in other parts of Europe, it's just a Mediterranean time thing or whatever, but that is, a challenge.
That is one. And people also have to look at the different types of residencies because every country has several. And some of those you need to start in your home country. Some of them you can start in the country you want to go to. If it's one that you start in the country you want to go to, I always recommend as soon as you step foot off the plane, you drop your bags off at wherever you're staying and you try to get an appointment immediately.
Yeah, good advice.
Because it could take a while and you may have to travel to another city or town to get the sooner appointment. It's not going to be just, oh, I arrived, oh, I can make an appointment and I'll get in within the next 10, 20 days. It could
they have
be
no business.
substantially
I mean, it doesn't
longer.
matter to them, right? Yeah, exactly.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And
And
others
now,
you have
and
to
you're
think
very
too.
true about what you said about the thing about different kinds of residency, like whether you can come in, like I said, my daughter, they're going to come in here on a tourist visa for 90 days now. Then they have to leave after 90 days, right? They cannot, so she can come and investigate school here. She can come go to the university, talk to them in person so she fully understands everything, but she cannot apply for school while she's here because she came in as a tourist, leave as a tourist. Thank you. You know what I mean?
Right.
You come in as a tourist, you leave as a tourist. You come in as a student,
And then when you
as
get
a
back
tourist.
to Canada, you apply as a student. And if you get it, then they'll send you everything. And then you can go and arrive.
So the process
as a
there is then
student.
you apply as a student, you get accepted by the school, then you apply for your visa at the embassy, the Maltese embassy in Canada. So there's a whole process. You think, oh, I can just come and apply. But whenever you get frustrated about stuff like that, it just makes me realize, wow, what immigrants do to get to Canada. We're a nation of immigrants, right? And then I think of how many people come to Canada or America, but who don't necessarily even have English as their language. And it's given me a whole new respect for the immigrant, because we're doing it by choice as expats with money in our pockets and with a choice of where we want to go. Right.
And
but imagine
honestly,
doing that.
Coming from North America, Canada, and the US, I mean, there's still a process and people still do get denied, but we generally get looked at more favorably than some people from other countries.
And there's something I should talk about.
That's the way it is.
Yeah, and that's true. And that's one thing I should talk about that I do not like about Malta, is that there's still with the older people especially, it's still a definite disturbing strain of racism that I noticed for sure as a Canadian.
It's not just Malta. There's many countries that are still
Europe in general, you're saying?
Yeah. And I think, where I think honestly part of the problem is, and it's just my personal opinion, I truly have no idea for sure, is where it becomes a problem though is because there's so much illegal immigration going on.
Well, this is what it happened
people coming
to
over that now with some people just look at any person.
Well, that's what it happened to. The Maltese will say that they used to be very welcoming or whatever, but then again, it's a small little island, and there's what's been happening in Europe with migrant crisis and everything because of everything we've all been messing with the whole world. And it's all like, so people are trying to find a better place. So yeah, that's the case. and because there is a lot of that, then and because there's all kinds of
Mm,
reasons that like overcrowding and stuff, where people are always pointing to the other, that's human nature. But one thing that's interesting too that makes me realize it and try to think of it in a bit of a different way than I would in North America, not to accept it, but I mean like to see like judge it in a different way and try to like
mhm,
educate people in a different way than I would be angry in North America, is that someone was telling me who was from the first wave of immigrants, because they really didn't even have immigration until like 15 years ago, or 20 maybe. And the first wave of immigrants was like Eastern Europeans after one of the wars. And they were saying the people in Gozo were like, it wasn't even, those were like white immigrants from Eastern Europe at the time, right? But they were the new people, the foreigners, and people in Gozo, which is so like insular that the on the lease it still says, Tracy, daughter of whoever and whoever of wherever, because they would
right.
put the village, that they were so insular that the people were actually. So my Eastern European friend, once she got settled in here and started to know the neighbors and everything, they told her, this is decade and a half ago, that when people started to move to Gozo, that they didn't actually know, like that they did people that they didn't know who they were and their families, what village they were from. They were actually scared. The word they used was like when they were scared because they didn't know who was going to move in next door to them, and that wasn't even a color or creed or race or religion thing then. It was literally strangers are going to be in the neighborhood.
Stranger.
And when I heard
Because
that,
before
it
it was
brought a
the
whole
community, right? You knew everybody. You grew up with everybody
for
and
hundreds of
generations and
years. So
generations.
all of a sudden they were like, I have no respect. And so when I heard that, it switched a little focus where I was like, okay, now I get where that's coming from more. It's not hateful. It really is like some xenophobia. Like they really are like they don't know what's going on. And then of course, there's all, whatever things happen. But that's one thing that I've noticed it like outright, like to the point where like it happens a lot. Like you'll get a cab with a Maltese driver or suddenly, and they'll say something about, you know, like that, and like I don't even can't think. They won't use a word or they'll say something that into that, and then I'll say, oh well, I'm a third country national. That's the term I use. TCNs, right? It's not
Mhm.
EU. Though I'm a wife of the EU, but whatever. I'm like I say I'm Canadian. I'm like, oh yeah, but some countries it's easier to mix with than other countries. And I said, I haven't heard the "Go Back to Your Country" yet, which is really famous. It's almost a joke where like if you complain about the fireworks or anything, you will hear like it doesn't matter who you are. Apparently, I will hear it at some point. If you don't like it, go back to your country. And I'm kind of waiting for that moment as well. I'll never hear it probably because I already have an answer, and my answer is like I would, but there's 40,000 Maltese in my country, which is more than the entire population of Gozo. So I figured, you could handle a Canadian here. Thank you. I'm in my country.
Well, I think it's part of integrating, right? When I think that people think like, and I've said if if somebody doesn't like something, they could either move abroad again or go back to their home country. And I don't mean
Yeah.
it as a bad thing, but the way that I see it is you're moving to another country, you integrate into that country.
And that's
Their
why I don't think I'll
rules,
ever hear it because
their
I
policy.
don't
I mean,
complain about yeah, people complain about
like
do you have in your country, like, I don't know, in Spain or Montenegro, if they're I know they're very Catholic, like Malta. So I don't know if they do the petards, like for the same, they have like festas. And
yeah,
this was a new thing. They'll be like, oh, wait till you have the stuff where you guys are going to complain. I didn't complain. I was expecting it, but I was still like, wow, that is really something because like they'll have for like 2.5 months, every village in the whole region, they have like the fireworks, for the saints and the villages and all this. So they have fireworks every night, like at 8 or 9, and then like at midnight and 1, like you go there's particular times, and then even at like it's scarier when I'm laughing because it doesn't. I still think it's all charming because but even like 8, 9 in the morning, it's not fireworks, it's petards, like
yeah,
which is gunpowder, like they're basically fireworks without the light. So just be sitting in there having your morning coffee and then like it literally sounds like a war zone. And I was videoing like just to freak out my friends, going like, oh, just another day. And I literally had people like, what's going on? Because it sounds like bomb. I'm like, oh, that's the gunpowder bombs. They're like, what? Is it safe? I'm like, yeah, it's Malta. It's really safe. It's
yeah.
for the saints.
And it's their tradition, right? And so it's like you can't complain about that.
No, I
That's
like
their
it. Yeah.
tradition. And honestly, if you don't like it, leave.
And that's when you hear things like
Just
"Go back to your country," right? When you
yeah.
people, because you do see people on the expats page complaining, "Oh, I have a little dog. He doesn't like the fireworks. Well, they've been doing it for 500 years. They're not going
And
to
it's not
stop
the
because
only
your
dog
dog
that's
doesn't
been
like the
there.
fireworks.
Yeah. And that's, and you know, that's not even just Malta, that's every country. And I think the part of moving abroad is we leave our countries for various reasons. Of course, there's things we like, things we don't like. But when we choose another one, it's up to us to integrate into that lifestyle and not up to them to appease us.
To make, I know exactly. You got to be like, this
So
is what's like here. It's,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's sounding like you're absolutely loving Malta. And if people wanted to get in touch with you, Tracy, maybe to learn a little bit more about Malta, or they're going there and just would love to connect with you, what would be some ways for them to connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm easy to find because I'm a publicist, which means I'm everywhere. So you can find me on LinkedIn with my name, Tracy Lamourie, Lamourie. You can find me on Facebook. Instagram is Tracy Lamourie PR Media. Yeah, really, I just find me under my name. Oh, and my website is lamouriemedia.com. You can also reach out to me if you want a publicist. But yeah, if you're coming to
Absolutely. If
Malta,
somebody's
honestly,
looking for one, for
but
sure.
you know, the nice thing about the expat life, though, this is part of what's fun about Malta is you do see, hey, I'm there for like a week. I'm just looking for a friend, and I've gone and hung out with people. Like I would never go do that in Canada. I'd be like, hey, sure, let's go. But I've hung out and just gone to the beach with like a girl that was here from America, made a new friend, another one, so there is that culture of like just getting together with, because, there are strangers here, people come in and out. And so if anybody is hitting Malta, I highly recommend Gozo. Again, it's a completely different vibe. It's quieter. Like most people just come here for a day trip or whatever. But if you can do a couple of days, it's like honestly, you look at it looks like 1,000 years ago, and it's a real like real
Amazing.
different kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time, Tracy. I'll make sure that we put all those links into the show notes below so people have an easy way to connect with you.
Thank you, and it's been a pleasure.